All right, let's dive into one of the most notoriously tricky ideas in all of modern philosophy. It comes from Martin Heidegger's famous lecture, What is Metaphysics? And it's all about a concept that, on the surface, sounds like a complete contradiction: the nothing.
Our entire lives we are surrounded by, well, things. Our world is just this massive collection of beings, objects, people, ideas. But Heidegger wants us to zoom out, to look at the background that all of this stuff appears against. He wants us to actually think about the nothing.
Now, for most of us, this whole idea just seems empty, right? I mean, from a scientific point of view, nothing is just a vacuum, an absence of stuff. And if you're a logician, even asking what is the nothing is a kind of grammatical mistake. It's a question that doesn't even make sense.
But Heidegger, he thought they were all missing the point. He argued that this concept we so easily dismiss isn't just real, it's actually the very foundation that makes our experience of the world and of ourselves even possible. So how on earth did he get there?
Okay, so Heidegger starts by taking on the biggest roadblock to this idea: science itself. He points out what he sees as a kind of massive blind spot in the whole scientific worldview.
He basically says that science, by its very nature, defines its job as studying everything that is. It's the study of being. So it follows that anything that is not a being is, by definition, completely outside its concern. And this chart really lays out that divide perfectly. On one side, you've got science investigating being, everything that is. And on the other, it just completely rejects the nothing. It treats it as null and void, a horror and a phantasm that has no place in any kind of serious conversation.
But here's where it gets really interesting, right? There's a hidden contradiction here. To say we study being and nothing else, science has to use the concept of nothing just to draw its own boundary. In the very act of throwing it out, science is forced to rely on it. It's a total paradox.
So science has this weird blind spot. But what about pure logic? You'd think that logic would have a much better handle on this. But this is where the problem gets even stranger.
Okay, let's break this down. From a purely logical perspective, the question literally self-destructs. The moment you ask what is the nothing, you're treating the nothing as if it's a something that exists. But its whole definition is the complete absence of anything that exists. The question contradicts itself and just, poof, it collapses into nonsense.
So what this really shows us is that our normal way of thinking, which always needs an object, something to think about, is totally unequipped to handle this idea. It's like trying to grab water with a fork. The tool just isn't right for the job.
And this is where Heidegger makes his most radical move. He basically flips the whole table. He says we've got it all backward. We don't arrive at the nothing by taking things and saying, not this, not that. Instead, he claims, our ability to say no in the first place only exists because we already have some kind of fundamental experience of the nothing.
Okay, so if science can't get us there, and logic just ties itself in knots, are we at a dead end? Heidegger says absolutely not. We just need to look in a completely different place, not in our logical thoughts, but in our moods.
His whole idea is that the nothing doesn't reveal itself through our intellect. It reveals itself through certain fundamental moods that kind of tune our entire existence. We have to feel our way to it.
And the key concept here is something he calls attunement. Think about those moments of really deep, profound boredom. I'm not talking about being bored with something specific. I mean that feeling where everything just seems flat and meaningless. In that moment, Heidegger says, you're not focused on individual things anymore. You're actually experiencing the backdrop of being as a whole. But there's one particular mood that takes this even further.
So Heidegger makes this absolutely critical distinction between fear and what he calls dread, or angst. Fear always has an object, right? You're afraid of the spider, of a deadline, of a specific danger. But dread, that's a whole different animal. It's this objectless unease. You feel it deeply, but you can't point to what you're in dread of. And this specific, strange, objectless feeling of dread, that's the key. That's what unlocks this entire mystery for Heidegger.
We've all felt this, even if it's rare. It's that feeling of profound uncanniness, where the familiar world suddenly seems strange. You can't put your finger on what's wrong, but you feel like the ground is shifting beneath your feet.
What's happening in that moment of dread, Heidegger says, is that the world of things doesn't just vanish. Instead, it loses its meaning. The whole network of significance that makes up our daily lives just recedes. Being as a whole starts to slip away.
And into that space, into that quiet left behind as all the things recede, that's where the nothing appears. This is it, the central thesis. Dread is the specific experience through which the nothing actually makes its presence felt to us.
Now, it is crucial to get this next part. The nothing isn't passive. It's not just an absence. It actively annihilates. And that doesn't mean it annihilates or destroys things. A better way to think about it is like a black velvet background that makes a diamond stand out. Annihilation is the active pushing away of everything, and it's that very pushing away that lets us see being as a whole for the very first time.
So, we've talked about science, logic, and this unsettling mood of dread. What's the final takeaway? Why does this strange and frankly kind of disturbing experience matter so much?
Well, according to Heidegger, pretty much everything depends on it. This encounter with the nothing is what allows us to step back from the world and see things as things in the first place. It's the source of our freedom, our very sense of self, and even our ability to ask that most fundamental of all questions: why is there something rather than nothing? The final, really mind-bending conclusion is that being human isn't just about being in the world of things. It's about being held out into the nothing. We are, at our core, suspended over this abyss, and that suspension is what defines our unique way of being.
And all of this leaves us with the ultimate question of metaphysics. It's a question that only becomes possible once we've dared to actually face the nothing itself. A question to really chew on long after this explainer is over.